welcome everybody to the Women of BSV, and on today's episode we have the most beautiful Chloe Tartan. She's a research scientist for Nchain, and lots and lots of very good things that we're going to talk about with Chloe. But first off, we're going to let Micah have a chat because Micah is on location.
So I'm here at the ESI. It's an esports event, and I'm here for the Bitcoin Association, talking a lot about BSV and how to use it in the esports area. Also supported yesterday Becky Legaro as moderation, and Cal, I don't know his surname, from Tel. So what's your role at Nchain?
So I'm a research scientist, so working with a research team, looking at different applications of the blockchain, primarily BSV, well, entirely BSV, but we work on sort of the technology itself from a quite fundamental level, looking at anything from cryptographic proofs through to, could this technology be used to solve social and environmental issues? And that's kind of where my heart is. So looking at blockchain for sustainability, and other sort of social issues that I'm sure we'll come on to as well.
Well, in the recent MNE report, it says concerning the carbon footprint, it's all about like scalability, which makes a huge difference for the BSV blockchain. People think when using proof of work, it's like a waste of energy. But what do you think? What can you say about the BSV blockchain technology?
Well, first of all, proof of work, you need it. It's this fundamental to the security of Bitcoin. So it's the thing that ensures that the network is secure and that it can scale. So without that, it's a fundamental piece. And any data that's stored on a proof of work blockchain then has these incredible properties of data integrity through the immutability of the data, so you can't actually change it after the fact. It's transparency, auditability. So these are really important features. And obviously, as we move into a data economy, and COVID has really helped accelerate that. Everything is becoming very data centric. So the importance of these features, can't be underestimated. So we need the proof of work aspect. Now, there's ways to make it more sustainable or energy efficient. And as you mentioned, the key one there is scaling, because the energy consumption isn't related to the block. It's related to, you can put as many transactions as you want inside a block. It won't change the amount of energy consumed. So it's really quite a waste then to not make the most of the fact that you're creating these blocks. Putting as much data on them is very important. And now then, what kind of data? And that's where utility comes into it. So if you can actually use the technology to solve environmental and social issues, for example, helping the renewable energy sector to help reduce carbon footprints, then you really can't claim that any energy is wasted if actually the technology is being used to solve that very issue that we're struggling to solve at the moment. The world is a very complex place, and global supply chains are very difficult to track. So actually, the fact that we have this global distributed network can be very, very useful to be able to get the data, the real-time data that we need to be able to say, okay, here's where we can cut emissions. Here's where we can create efficiencies in different industries. And also the other sort of important piece about the way Bitcoin is designed is that its power consumption is mobile. So you can sort of harvest wasted energy in remote parts of the world that would otherwise be wasted. So there are many, many things that we can do to optimize the network, and it's all sort of happening in BSV, and it's something that's really important to us at Nchain as well.
I see. And I mean, as I'm here at the ESI London, esports, iGaming, are there any use cases for the BSV blockchain that you can see in this sector?
So I did do some research in the iGaming sector. I mean, as a sort of putting my scientist hat on, we were looking more at sort of how we can use transactions on the blockchain to sort of create random numbers. So in iGaming, right, everything's online, and everything really is powered by lots and lots of random numbers. I mean, that's essentially what's going on under the hood. So if you can use the technology to be able to support that and do it in what's called a provably fair way, then that's that can be very powerful, because ultimately you don't really know if you can trust necessarily the gaming platform that you're using. You know, the users,
especially for gambling.
Well, exactly. So it's important to some users, not all of them, but some, to be able to have that sort of certification of sort of this is provably fair, or can I go and check that the result was actually correct, and it wasn't it wasn't
misrepresented or whatever.
So because, as I said, any data that's on the blockchain is immutable, you know that someone wouldn't have tampered with it. And that's really powerful for that sort of use case. There are a number of different use cases in iGaming. It's not something that I'm working on at the moment, but it's definitely a sector that's very closely tied with BSV, just because it can be used in these properties can be used in many ways. So, yeah. I think there's a lot more to come from that area of research. I think provably fair is, it's an
slightly
old school term.
Craig sort of started out, didn't he? I think
in the gambling industry.
Yeah, Craig and Calvin both, actually. Yeah.
But where's your start, Chloe? How did you get into the field? What did you study? What do the people have to do to go into this field?
I mean, honestly, I don't know how I ended up here. My background has nothing to do with what I do now, other than maybe the word scientist. So I studied physics for my bachelor's, and then went on to do space science and engineering. I was sort of really geeky about anything to do with space, and thought I'd be an astronaut one day, and I just had too much of a social life, so that didn't happen. But then sort of entered the world of engineering. And studied photonics. So that's anything to do with light, basically. And ended up doing a PhD in liquid crystal microfabrication. Probably words that don't mean a lot, but liquid crystals are, you probably know them from LCD screens. So they kind of revolutionized the flat panel displays industry, but the materials have really interesting properties. So they're not just useful for that. And then I finished my PhD, and I was like, what do I do now? I have no idea. So I decided to get a job in something that my heart's in, which was in sustainability. Nothing to do with anything I'd studied. Did that for 6 months, and then realized I still like geeking out with some tech and science. So stumbled across the job at Nchain, and it was sort of in a very up and coming industry. People were talking about Bitcoin. I didn't know how it worked. I wouldn't say I'm like a savvy investor. So I'd sort of not been introduced to technology other than hearing about it. And I just wanted to know how it worked, really. And Nchain have been really, very accommodating of my sustainability, sort of me banging on about that basically at work. So they've allowed me to sort of forge my own path, looking at how the technology can be used for that.
That's good though, but that really fits with what's happening in the industry at the moment, doesn't it? So
I mean, it takes one tweet from Elon Musk and everyone's like, this is important now. And I'm like, hey, I said this 3 years ago.
So this is interesting though, because literally you came across the technology before you'd actually heard about like Bitcoin. So you knew about blockchain technology before you heard the word Bitcoin. Is that kind of where
it's the opposite, in the sense that I'd heard about Bitcoin just because my friends had invested in it, and they'd sort of, they were using it as a cryptocurrency, but I hadn't had any experience with it other than hearing about it, through social media and friends. So, but I was more interested in how the technology works.
The tech,
So then I went into it learning about blockchain technology. And yeah,
that's where kind of we all have something in common here, is more or less that it's the technology that actually interests us, more than, you know, and what you can do with that technology and how far advanced that technology is, and obviously the kind of accountability and, you know, the transparency of that technology.
I think this is an encouraging aspect, that you don't have to have like a specific like blockchain background from yourself, but you can come from
Any background.
Any background can take its position in the blockchain field. I think this is very encouraging. And from Nchain, I mean, we are the women of BSV, and didn't you also create another woman blockchain group? Yes. I love the website. It was really wonderful looking. So how did you get to do this?
So when I started at Nchain, I was there was another lady in the research team, but she wasn't really in the office. So it was really just myself in the sort of technical roles in the vicinity of sort of where I worked. I think there were a few ladies in engineering, but again, they weren't in the office too much. So it's a systemic issue. I mean, this has been the case in every university I've been to. I was always the minority, for myself, that just fueled me to go for it more. But you know, I can see how that would be off-putting to a lot of people. So it was something that we were already discussing before COVID, before lockdown, was to sort of set up a women in blockchain group to support the women at Nchain. Then COVID kicked off and found that I had all this free time, and well, mostly for my sanity, sort of thought, well, I need to reach out to other people. As I mentioned, I'm a bit of an extrovert, so I kind of need other human beings, basically. But it was for selfish reasons, but also just seeing, you know, other colleagues of mine at Nchain who had to then suddenly juggle looking after kids, and the struggles were very real. And I don't think what we did with WiBs, and the website you're referring to, was set up with a friend who worked at Money Button, Huge. Well, Huge is her nickname. She's actually very small, but
is she the lady that did the educational series with Ryan?
Yes,
he'd done the theory of Bitcoin. Yeah, I know exactly. Yeah, I watched those. Yeah.
So she's very very talented, and so she had heard about this idea to do a women in blockchain group, and that's when it sort of grew beyond Nchain, and we started to do these sort of external facing seminars and things just to kind of bring everyone together and talk about how we can support each other through these difficult times. And actually the externally facing stuff was a bit easier because everyone was home, and we were sort of just kind of preparing interesting topics that we thought people would want to hear about. Now that life's semi-normal, or we're trying to find the new normal, maybe is a better way to say it, people coming back into the office and stuff, we've sort of realized that we think it's more important to focus internally on like fostering a community within Nchain and making sure that the women that we work with directly are supported, and we do have that kind of safe space to come to when we have, you know, ideas that we may, you know, want to present, but maybe don't have the confidence to do so, to be able to sort of knowledge share and share skills. So now we're doing less of the public outreach and more internally focusing, just to really get that strong foundation that I think is really important before we kind of go and try to enact systemic change, and which is still on the agenda, but you know, this is 100% part of it. You know, I think it's all about the baby steps, and it's just sort of making sure you've got that foundation in place. So
it's funny because it quite mirrors what happened with us, because I think during lockdown we all felt a bit lonely and separated and stuff, and it was born slightly out of the idea of you know, getting a bit more FaceTime with each other because we couldn't travel. And yeah, it's it's been such a rewarding thing to kind of have a group of friends who are all interested in the same topic, and we do as much chatting offline as we do on, really.
I know.
So
I'm in your Twitter group. I see.
Yeah.
I get my phone's buzzing all the time. It's amazing how active you guys are.
Can I ask you a bit about your education, Chloe? Because I have rarely met somebody with so many degrees as you.
I think I got a bit carried away.
But it's very impressive and starting to rival Craig himself, really.
Oh God, I wouldn't tell him that.
Well, it's very impressive. I mean, is it four degrees you've got?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm honest with you, it's just because I didn't want to grow up. I tried to stay at school as long as possible. So I mean, thanks for the compliments, but it was very much me being anti. I don't want to get a job. I want to stay in school forever. To be honest, that's why I love my job at Nchain, because I literally get paid to learn. I mean, it's can't get better than that.
Researchers, sounds just up your street, actually. Yeah, if you enjoyed being at university for that. Yeah. And could you tell us a bit about your photonic work? Because that sort of fascinates me, working with light. What were the kind of applications you were putting it to? What sort of thing?
So for the masters that I did, that was in photonic system development. So they had like so many different avenues that you could choose. The 2 projects that I did there, the first one was, I think it sounds a bit boring, but you can tell me. It was just ultra efficient LEDs.
So it was not boring, trust me.
I think I'm sorry. I'm
LEDs are such an amazing area of development at the minute, isn't it? I mean, it's in everything now. Yeah,
anything to do with light. Yeah,
I think that degree just it really cemented the fact that light is like incredible.
Everything.
I mean, the opportunities are endless. I mean, a lot of people went down sort of the quantum computing route, and a lot of people are more interested in like telecommunications and sort of optics. I stumbled across that because it was more to do with microscopy, so I thought it was really cool to see things very small. Using all these big machines to look at things on like the nanoscale and stuff. So we would they'd create samples in the lab to basically try to create these different optimize these LED materials, and then we'd analyze them in all these sort of the microscopy suite, and it's just really cool to see things at that scale. So that was the first mini project I did. The second one was guiding medical devices in the human body using ultrasound, and looking at basically creating these optical fibers that were coated in a kind of material that would allow them to basically let sort of doctors see what they were doing effectively through sort of minimally invasive surgeries. So
I see.
And that technology has come very, very far. So I mean, this was yonks ago. When did I do that degree? That was in 2013. So I'm very out of loop with the field, but I'm pretty sure that's come much further than it has. But the photonics is such a catch-all term. I mean, it's literally anything to do with light.
Well, I did actually look it up before speaking to you, because I thought, photonics, what is that? And it sounds like it's almost everything. When you really get down to it, it can be used for, in computing, in broadband technologies, like you say, in medicine.
It's basically like
lasers
exactly. So it's like using anything that uses photons, which is the particle of light, right? So for my PhD, we were looking at, like I said, these liquid crystal materials, and we would use these really, really powerful lasers to mix these liquid crystal materials with light sensitive materials, so that when you shone a very powerful laser at it, it would create it would polymerize, so you'd get like whatever the light did to that material, it would stay that way. Basically, it would stay in that polymer, and so you could create. So we got a patent out from that, one of the projects I did, which was we called it invisibility cloaking. So we could essentially, it's
Cool.
really lame. I'm not very good at selling my research, am I? We basically made very, very small things go invisible in very specific conditions.
Oh wow. I can't even begin to imagine how that works. What is it doing? Is it bouncing the light away from it? What's it doing?
Okay, do you want me to actually?
Yeah, you want to know. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to try my best. So liquid crystals they respond to electricity and light in a way that, so if you imagine you've got like a liquid crystal device, which would be two glass plates, and you've got this material in the middle, and it's like a phase between a liquid and a solid. That's where it gets its name from, like a kind of gel-like texture. So if you shine light through this device this way, the material, the molecules will want to align with the light source. So they start to kind of move,
so they kind of polarize,
align with it. And what happens is, if you're looking at it through a microscope, you'll see different colors, because it's allowing the different wavelengths of light to come through, right? So if you imagine on a liquid crystal display, when you've got these pixels on your display, actually what's going on is
like
that
a rainbow.
Each molecule is like being shifted. You have a voltage across it, so you can basically tell the molecule to kind of go this way, and then the light will come through and different colors will come through that.
It's like refraction.
It's exactly. Yeah.
Because it's like a prism, isn't it? When the sun comes and it just reflects off. So it's the same kind of principle, but in a liquid form.
Yeah.
So is that what every pixel on a screen is doing then? Is getting either signal on or off kind of thing?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, LCDs aren't really used much anymore, but yeah, you could think of it as that. So you're kind of switching the voltage to make the molecules move in a certain position, and then when you shine the light through that, you're going to get a different color through it, basically.
And why did we switch from LCD to LED? What was is it a power reason? Does it use less power? What's the
it's just it's a lot more efficient, basically. So I know OLEDs now are the kind of go-to, aren't they?
Yeah, because in the theatre, when I used to be, we had lime lights, because they used to be charged by lime. And then it moved to kind of tungsten halogen, and then you moved over to LEDs, and literally an LED light would give you about 20 times kind of the duration of what an old tungsten light would do, and even more so. And then you've got the variations of colors and everything, and it's a cooler and it's more easily transportable, and they're not so heavy. So for a theatrical kind of and a TV kind of environment, it works out so much cheaper and so much better for LEDs. And the same within the home as well, isn't it? If you've got lighting within the home and their LEDs, it works out more energy efficient. So that's kind of where my understanding of LEDs comes from, but I'm sure yours is very much deeper than that, to be fair.
Well, I don't know. My head's very much in the blockchain world now. I mean, I remember things from my degrees, but it's not like it's all.
You're not living in it.
Mind,
Yeah.
So how do you see blockchain could help? I mean, obviously, it's just like you're inventing things. So what kind of things can you share with us that you've invented that are blockchain?
Well, something that I'm working on at the moment, which again, remember my passion's more on sustainability, so environmental, social issues. We're looking at how the blockchain can be used to support welfare management. So the idea came out of actually trying to think about digital inclusivity. So from when the internet sort of took off, which obviously feels like a very long time ago now, that there was a digital divide started, and it started growing because people didn't necessarily have the infrastructure set up, nor the digital skills to be able to use the internet effectively, or they may not have the resources to do so. Data poverty is very much a real thing, and all of this was compounded and highlighted during COVID, right? And you saw it where as soon as schooling became remote, you saw that actually a lot of kids didn't have access to
couldn't get online
devices,
or they didn't have a quiet space to do it. Yeah,
exactly. And and they may not have had the skills necessarily to be able to sort of use these things. It was 23% of deprived schools. I know this because I've been working on a presentation for it. So only 23% of deprived schools had an online existing platform, compared to 60% of private schools. So so there was like a big rush for getting the infrastructure in place to be able to teach these kids remotely, getting devices shipped out to them. Then that's not even tackling data poverty. There's a lot of reports of parents having to choose between eating or topping up because they were on pay-as-you-go connections, topping up their data. So now you start to think, well, the technology is only advancing, and there's like AI, big data, blockchain. What's going to happen to the digital divide? It's just going to keep getting bigger because suddenly, and it's not just from the sense of like a user perspective. It's also in the workplace. Like people now, if you can code, you're more likely to get a job. If you've got, you're digitally literate in some ways. So the workplace is also evolving, and then that's going to compound the divide even further, right? So when you're thinking about welfare, social welfare, digital welfare is a component of that now, and it's a really important one that we can't ignore. So can you actually use the technology that kind of created this divide in the first place to solve it? So I've been working on a paper that sort of collaboration with Swansea University, looking at creating a welfare management system. So basically, the key problems is that you don't have a lot of transparency into who has access to what, where. We need, again, always comes back to data. We need accurate data to be able to say, okay, this community here, or even this farmer Giles in this remote part of, Scotland doesn't have the infrastructure in place to even access online. Really just to preempt the fact that we might go into lockdown again. What's going to happen? Some people are literally completely isolated.
And big swathes of the welfare system as well. If you've not got a mobile phone, you are really shit out of luck, aren't you?
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, there's so many components to this. If you think about the people who are on the sort of poorer end of the spectrum, people are reliant on social welfare, social support. Things like universal credit is a digital by default benefit that is designed to help the people who need, the most help, yet they're the ones that are most likely to not have digital skills.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or digital device or data.
Yeah.
May not have enough food, let alone anything else.
Yeah, it's a very much a catch-22 situation.
It's really like a self-perpetuating problem.
And then you've got the opposite scale where, there are pensioners, that actually, they only have maybe a mobile phone that allows them to text and call people, but it's not a smart device. So therefore, they're still in that kind of category as well, where they can't access what they really need because it's not available for them. And you can't assume that everybody is able to access
at a minimum level. Yeah.
You can't.
Concerning social wealth, I also would take a look at the concept of charmas. Charmas is like an African thing, how societies raise money together to invest into something. Ian Brick really did a lot of research in this field and also creating something in it. Maybe, just an idea for you.
How are you spelling that, Micah? Chalmers. Spell that for me.
Chama, I think.
Okay.
Man, Ian Brick. Chama is a concept of communities to raise money, even if you don't have enough money for your as an individual. But as a group, a large group of people who trust each other, collecting money.
Sounds like Ubuntu, but like Michael Tellinger's doing. It sounds like the same kind of concept. Yeah.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned community because that's the kind of thing that we came back to when we were designing this solution for how could you use something like the blockchain or technology in general, but obviously we're looking at the properties that blockchain offers to help welfare management. Then community support is so crucial. Not only, you know, there is the data components, and that's how you can support the institutions by sort of ensuring that you have, you know, transparent records of, you know, who gets what, when and where, and making sure that, you know, everything's auditable, so you can access those people that have been kind of maybe missed out. But then what do you do? How do you support them once you've identified them? And that's where community support is so important. You know, people won't necessarily, some people aren't even motivated to get online. You know, they don't feel safe. There's a lot of fears. I mean,
absolutely,
cybersecurity, you know, they hear a lot of scams and stuff. They don't, and then they may not know how to, if they are incentivized to do so. So that's where community support is very important. And then it's then incentivizing communities and like the digitally included people, so people who know, you know, who have access to those skills, to then go and share them in their local community with those people. And often we lean on sort of economic incentives because that's what we think is, you know, I mean, that's what secures the entire Bitcoin network. It's the fact that the whole thing is kind of running on the fact that it wouldn't be financially viable to attack the network. You know, you're better off actually being honest because that's the way you're going to be able to sustain a living if you're sort of a miner, or if you're, you know, if you take that kind of core idea and then apply it to different settings and different problems, you see that it becomes very powerful. Being able to sort of do, you know, sort of smart contracts on chain where you can get people to sign up and say, okay, you're going to run a you know, a bingo night that where you have a workshop about digital inclusion, and to really get traction with the older people in the community and get them to come along. And you know that, okay, that's going to get a real sort of, that's the space that these people are comfortable in, so that's where you could really reach them. And if you do this, you'll get a, you know, a reward, a financial reward in return for that. So yeah, whether it's economic incentives that speak to people or just sort of social preferences, some people actually just want to help. So you don't, you know, you don't need to,
they don't need a payment.
Yeah. But it's about getting that sort of the micro action and then the macro to sort of work together. And I think that's where something like the blockchain is incredibly powerful, because you have, you know, it has benefits at all those levels, basically.
Aligned incentives.
Exactly,
yes. Yeah. And also that ability to help people cooperate. I don't know whether you know Daniel Krawitz, but that's a subject that he talks about a lot, is the fact that blockchain allows people, you know, who are trying to achieve different goals to cooperate with each other, you know, through the mechanism of trust and interoperability, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I mean, if I'm honest with you, obviously you know that I've studied and worked in all these different things. I didn't expect to still be working in, you know, the Bitcoin community, and it's every year I buy into the vision more and more, and it's really
being sucked in
so organically. I'm a very curious person, so I was like, I just want to know how it works, and I've now started to realize that, because I, you know, obviously I enjoy public outreach and did sort of those seminars with WiBs, and but I've now started to realize that, look, it's okay if people don't actually understand deeply how the technology works. That's not where society will gain most value. It's very complex. It's taken me ages to get my head around it.
God,
you know,
yes. I know. 10 years in, I still, have a lot to learn.
Yeah, I mean, and the analogy is often like the internet, like how many people use it, and now how many of those people actually understand how it works, and do they really need to, you know? It's being able to understand, I suppose. I think what's nice about when you think about data on the blockchain and just sort of communicating via a sort of distributed network is who owns what. And it's once you understand that better, and you understand that actually, you know, you don't have to put your trust into anyone, because it's sort of, it's like a trustless system in the
Taken
sense
care
that,
of, yeah.
you know, and you own your data, not some
The
centralized
corporation, yeah.
then those are the real sort of crucial things you need to get across to people, I think, when you're having a discussion about what Bitcoin actually is, right? It's not just a cryptocurrency.
But like you're saying, though, you need to meet them where they are and meet their need, whatever that is. And for a lot of people, it's just, how on earth do I get my benefits? You know, how do I get through to this, the benefit system when their phone lines are all busy? How, you know what I mean? How do I fill in this form when my credits have run out my phone? You know, it's like there's so much there, isn't there, about how we could improve.
Did you guys know that the government had trialed a welfare payment system on the blockchain back in 2016? It was this. Yeah, no, I didn't know either. It was something called GovCoin. Check it out.
Right.
And they'd done a proof of concept. So with the startup to see if they could issue welfare payments using the blockchain. It wasn't Bitcoin. I don't recall. I don't think they even specified which blockchain it was. But
do you know what
they decided not to go ahead?
Was it because it wasn't scalable?
Yep.
Is that what it was?
It's like they listed all these problems. They listed all these problems, of the main one being scalability, and you're like,
so they tried to build their own and weren't very successful at it. So because I personally see a lot of very good uses for the government using it because of the fact that it is transparent. But I would think that it's probably something that they don't want to use because it is transparent. Because I personally think that putting most of the NHS on blockchain would be a good idea. I think that patient records, EHR data, you being in control of your own patient data is a good thing. I think, lots of the tax office be great to use.
Massive project.
It would
be
great.
They want to cut you off from your benefits because they can tie all the different things and aspects of your life to whether or not you're worthy or qualify for those benefits. That is like sketchy territory of being able to cut people off from being able to participate in society with credit type stuff. Like it just are you seeing any of that kind of stuff being laid in the groundwork with what you guys are creating, Chloe?
I think something we need to be mindful of is that when people have a right to be forgotten, they have complete right to their privacy. There are more and more acts, GDPR coming through that are trying to regulate this because they've realized that it's getting out of control, and all these companies, Facebook and other, they have this, Meta, whatever they're called now. They have all this information about us, and it is a real invasion of privacy. So when you're thinking about the public sector, I think it's important to always bear that in mind, and just being able to ensure accountability, being able to audit things correctly. Transparency isn't just necessarily having raw data and having all this information about me or my records on a public ledger. It's also about having transparency of who is accountable for what. So coming back to the universal credit example, there have been so many cases now because they're using this algorithm that wasn't quite ready to be used to make decisions of who's eligible for what. And then when it comes to people are actually losing out quite a bit because they're being hurt by this sort of digital system. Now, universal credit is just one example. It's really quite shocking how many.
Well, that's my fear, is that computer says no thing, and it's like, what do you do? Computer says no, and then what? So at the heart of every system, we have to have people still, I think.
This is what I mean. So, and that's why, again, it's like that idea of community support. Human intervention is very important. You can't just remove that aspect of it. But it's accountability, and it's about knowing that, okay, if I have rather than having the raw data, just something to log what happened in a private database, so that every time someone accessed my files or I applied to something or whatever, anything to do with my records, there was an automatic sort of log on the blockchain, so that at least you always have that information ready to hand, to then, if you come to the point of dispute, you can go, well, I didn't do that, or actually I did do that, or who did this, and having sort of, that signed off by whichever authority, because that's the real problem, isn't it? It's like, are you getting the help that you need? If not, why? Have you been sort of like siloed off by the system? I mean, and even when, the NHS example, the biggest problem really is that, and I speak to, every time I speak to a doctor, they're like, they're using, last time I spoke to my GP, he said that he couldn't read a letter because the receptionist could, because they're using different systems. This isn't the same.
It's ridiculous.
GP
building.
So I had to read it out to him, because he's like, I'm really sorry, this is very embarrassing, but my computer won't let me read the document that my receptionist has.
Insane. With
And
my blood test
inefficient.
results have to be faxed from my hospital to my GP surgery. Faxed. I mean, is that even still in existence?
Exactly. So no system is kind of working together at all, right?
No.
And to be able to change that is unrealistic. For us to go, okay, let's just put this all into one system, it's just not going to happen, at least not in our lifetimes. I personally think it's too expensive. It's going to be a real
Well, it's
mess.
failed a couple of times now, hasn't it? Digitization of the NHS. They've tried and tried. It's such a massive thing. But maybe it needs to start at the individual level and kind of propagate outwards,
Patient records for one, if you actually controlled your own patient records instead of 5 different places having them, and then they're not talking to each other, that's a start.
I think you should definitely have the right to have access to your records whenever you please, of course. That goes without saying, and it's ridiculous that sometimes you have to fight for it. No, it's
you
ridiculous.
have to write to them, and then you have to request your patient data, and then they send it to you, and then when you've got it, then you haven't got the full records anyway, because you need to write to every single different place that you've been to, and your doctor does not have any of that at all. He just has his own records.
But what did happen is that each actor involved, each sort of entity, every time they did something, or there was a log of that somewhere that everyone could see, then if you see a disparity, or they said, well, you did have that scan, and you're like, no, I didn't. I never got the letter, or whatever, you can say, well,
there's a record.
No,
Well, and expanding this to, everything an individual does, and not just their healthcare records. I remember listening to Dr. Craig Wright the other day talking about, how if you buy a soda on the can, there can be a QR code, registering that you purchased that soda. And if you throw it into the harbor, that there can be repercussions as that's cleaned up, to name and shame that you were the one that dumped that, littered and whatnot. So as far as social credit or not, but social welfare goes, the fusion centers of the future could very easily, if they are transparent and everyone can see that you're a big litterer or whatnot, can they turn you off from being able to, participate in society and different benefits and things like that based on your behavior in the world and whatnot? I know the blockchain can incentivize, people to be better humans on the earth and, in the way we engage with each other. But, as far as people having their survival benefits and whatnot, I'm really curious what the fusion centers of the future are going to look like when everything is transparent on every action that we're taking in the world. And how that will, encourage and incentivize people to interact with each other. Is that kind of record keeping going to be transparent, where I can see, obviously the HIPAA protected stuff with medical records and whatnot, but your social behavior, is that kind of thing going to be available for everyone to find out, what kind of person you are?
It can all be used for good, or it can be used for evil, and it really depends who's wielding the sword. And so the way I look at BSV is that it's so important to keep it to keep everybody else honest in a way. Because I think as long as we've got this auditable chain where we know exactly how many coins there are, there's so many of these different cryptos where you still don't know how many coins are in existence, you know, and that it's the SPV functionality where you're sending the transaction directly to the person. These things, I think, are protections against what we're talking about. Because, you know, the idea of being able to switch someone off, as it were, for misbehaving in public or whatever, or not
Or
going
just
along with
disqualify them from benefits or whatnot.
Yeah, and that's scary. But I don't see BSV as being the chain that would be used to do that with, personally. What do you think, Chloe?
I don't know if I'm maybe a bit too optimistic about it all, but I can't see that being the way the technology would be used. I think that, you know, if and when it is adopted, say, by the public sector, then they will have so much regulation to deal with about doing it in an ethical way. You know, the fact that it's the hesitation mostly with the uptake of a public blockchain is the fact that it's public, and people don't necessarily understand that it's not a big deal. You can actually encrypt things, you can hash things, so you just have a fingerprint of that data. You know, you need to have that conversation basically for people to go, oh, why wouldn't I just use a private blockchain? And you're like, well, there's loads of reasons. So my view is that, you know, that we're almost at like this sort of digital revolution, and people are starting to understand the importance of data, right? And we're having this conversation now where we're saying we want access to our own records. We want ownership of that. And I don't think that's going to go away. I think this is just the start of it, where people have more and more understanding of how important it is that they own their data. So I'm less worried about this kind of, the sort of science fiction kind of almost future where we will be sort of, you know, monitored for every single action.
Well, when he said that, you know, we could name and shame you as a litterer from that QR code, I was like, well, where would those records be kept? And how would each individual's person's actions be transparent to the world if that kind of stuff is possible? You know what I mean? Like, I just didn't know.
I haven't seen the clip you said, but I mean, you know, something that obviously have worked with Craig for a few years now, and whenever he's sort of spoken about something, it's taken me a while to get my head around it. So he's a massive visionary, and he can think very far into the future about what all the possible,
it's like 100 steps ahead
could happen, right? It doesn't mean that that's going to be our lives. It's just you know, being mindful of those things, having that awareness, so that we can develop the technology in the way that we think is the most ethical and is used in the most ethical way. And I think tracking someone for every little thing they do is probably not the most ethical way to use the transparency that the blockchain offers. But, you know, using the transparency to ensure that everyone has food on their table is a lot more ethical. So I do think we're at this point, we are the innovators. Like, it's still a very young technology, and we're here to teach other people how to use it. So
do you think
I wouldn't worry about that. I'd focus more on the good that it can do and get that message across.
Do you think people are understanding what data sovereignty is all about, or do you think there's still quite a bit of resistance because people think it is going to be this tracking thing, and actually they're seeing it in the wrong way? I personally think that I personally think, I know people don't agree with me on this, that it's people don't understand it yet. I think that we're at the very start of that journey, and you know, we're very much sort of trying to create at Nchain this narrative around the importance of data integrity and what that means. And I think we did a survey with Frost and Sullivan that they found that there's actually a large number of companies that
report a need for data integrity, but they don't necessarily know how to solve it, or they don't know what to do about it. But I don't know. I mean, how often do you have a chat with a friend or a family member and they're like, oh, I just really want data integrity. You know, it's not,
not many. It's not something really a priority.
I don't know. You say it in different ways, though, don't you?
Of course. I just mean it's not
frustration of coming into contact with
when you explain to people though that say Facebook, like, you know, if you upload a photo or you upload something to Facebook or Instagram, and they actually are the people that now own that they own your copyright. You know, just because of the way they've written their terms and conditions, and then they can make money out of your data. When you point that out to people and then go, well, you could actually use this and it's your data and you can actually decide whether or not you want, then that does become a conversation. But it's just, you know, a lot of people still aren't aware of the fact if you upload something to Facebook, it no longer belongs to you, it belongs to them. You know, because of the way that T's and C's are written. So, there's a big kind of void in that kind of knowledge. I get that.
And just contact lists and things, you know, apps having access to all your photos and your friends lists, and, you know, building, you know, profiling people. And there's a lot here that people don't even think about.
Yeah, people are just starting to understand what the impact of that is, and so I think that conversation needs to happen a bit more. And unfortunately, probably a few more instances where you see the negative consequences of that, for it to then reach a tipping point. People to go, I don't want to use these kinds of. I mean, I know loads of people who don't use Facebook anymore. You know, they don't feel comfortable with that. No. My mum's actually. I really wish she'd had chatted with Craig, because she's actually way ahead of all of us. She's been like deleting all her social media accounts for years. She was like, I don't like that they're watching me, and if anyone sends her spam, she'll get right to the source of it and go, how did you get my email? I get spam all the time. And she's like, no. She's like, it's an invasion of my privacy. You know, what is this?
I think a lot of people don't understand privacy laws as well, that actually there are a lot of things on, especially with Facebook, where it is an invasion of your privacy. Especially, you know, I mean, there are certain things that you don't want to happen, where you don't want certain people sending you certain pictures that you don't want through your chat, but it's open for anybody, you know, and a lot of people aren't aware of the settings that are on there as well. You know, go to your settings and do all of this. People don't read the small print.
For the people that I work with, a lot of my target market is the people that have, you know, leading edge content that's being censored or demonetized or deplatformed. And one of the things that I say, I think that really hits home with that worldview is, you know, that what's happening with these new social networking and advertising platforms built on the blockchain, it allows us to have peaceful resistance to the legacy platforms and what they're doing with these shadow operations. And that's what we need, is just build the new that makes all that stuff obsolete, where we don't actually even have to fight it. We just let it die. Just pull your energy out of it and let it
attract people to something better.
So it's just a matter of letting them know that, hey, this is an option, so that you get to use your free will choice to decide what you want to participate in as a sovereign free being. So that's my favorite part of what I'm doing with marketing, is really trying to hit that home with people, is, you know, we don't even have to use these platforms to make money and advertise and do all this stuff anymore. The new's been built and just makes those obsolete. So Micah said she has to leave, so we'll go ahead and say bye to her. Well,
thank you, Micah.
Thank you so much, Micah.
Thank you, everyone. Sorry, it's a very loud location here, but the greetings from the ESI London. Thank you, Chloe, for all the information. It was really nice seeing you and speaking to you. And maybe see you soon in a live situation, hopefully.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Thank you. See you.
See you, Mike.
Bye-bye.
Talking about meeting up in real life, that's something that we would really love to do at some point. So anytime that you organise a Women in Blockchain event down in London or whatever, let us know, because Dilly and I might be able to show up if no one else. So.
I'd love, no, that would be awesome. I think it's that's why when I said, you know, we're still trying to find our feet as a group, but it's because now people are sort of going back to the office and trying to figure out, are we doing in-person events? Yeah, are we not? But it's been great. HR are really, so they've been wonderful. They funded us to go to this Women in Tech conference last week, which was awesome.
Nice.
Such interesting things that they talked about. Like,
I mean, how do you kind of like envision getting more girls interested in the blockchain space? Is that something that, you know, is that something that you may be thinking of outreaching to in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So I went on a a school trip with a group of A-level students. They were doing physics, and I was there to sort of help them with, they had these fun interactive trips, fun interactive sort of experiments, sort of, and things to do with electronics or things to do with like little lectures and seminars about stuff. And I was invited to talk about Bitcoin and blockchain. They were, of course, I started by saying, have you heard of it? And they're like, my brother's got some. Like, I don't know how it works, but he loves it. He's got loads of money, and I don't know, whatever, you know, they were like, but they found it really interesting. So I think, you know, I was, after doing balls and stuff, and I had such a good time. It was in France. It was great. But it's, yeah, you can really feel the value of that. So it's ultimately, it's just having that conversation a lot, really. Of course, public outreach helps, sort of in terms of creating educational content, but actually going and talking to someone, it makes such a difference.
So different, yeah.
If I may tell you, Diddy and Ruth and I the other day had a meeting with a lady that does 3D virtual summits, and we were thinking about having a Women in BSV summit. And so she's actually in the process of putting us together a proposal. If there's any interest from you and Nchain and all of your network to kind of come on and co-create with us with a virtual summit, we could also do a live event somewhere tied with it. But we would obviously need investment money to really make it happen, but really focusing on inviting and encouraging and inspiring more women to come into the blockchain space with a women-focused summit. Is something that, like, I just have this vision of, I really want to see come true with all of you. So I would love to, you know, when she comes back with that documentation, we can make sure to pass that on to you. And if you have any interest, you know, helping us see that come to life, excuse me. I know we were going to reach out to Nchain for possible investment and, you know, getting that out to the masses. So I just think the timing of a summit like that, with everything that's getting ready to kind of shift in the blockchain conversation, would be really amazing. So
definitely, I think that sounds awesome. We've been sort of having this discussion for a while now, but it's ultimately, it is up to us, I think, as women in because as much as a company can endorse you, and they are, you know, they're sort of giving us the space to be able to work on this. It's our experiences that will affect change, and by going and talking to more people, that's why I'm so passionate about it, you know, talking to more and more people and explaining why it's important to create that safe space, why it's important to actually have that sense of community for minority groups, you know, and it's not just women, it's ethnical minorities, it's, you know, it's LGBTQ, it's making that inclusivity, right, to be able for people to feel like their voice will be heard.
Well, and Coin Geeks conferences are so focused on enterprise and business, versus a conference that we could do or a summit that we could do would really be focused on that individual that you're talking about, and especially the minority individual.
Exactly. So
the whole thing could just speak directly to them.
I think it's a fantastic idea, and I like, honestly, I've never felt like not included at Nchain, right? I wouldn't still be there if I didn't, but ultimately I am still a minority group, and I will be aware of that, you know. It's inevitable. There are times when I'm like, oh, I'm the only woman in the group. Oh, maybe I shouldn't say that. Oh, maybe I was so really stupid to say, whatever it is, you know, it just happens. It's inevitable. And I think just bringing that conversation, normalizing that conversation, being like, you know, we can, we'll just lift each other up and empower each other is fantastic. So I'm very keen to be involved in anything that can reach that goal, basically.
Cool. Well, maybe you can help us with the Nchain angle once we get the proposal. And then, you know, obviously you have a really good network of some power hitters in blockchain and all that stuff that I think would be a great fit for presenting and highlighting what they're doing specifically, so we can, you know, give that support. So
fantastic. Look, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you so much, Chloe, for coming on. We really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Fascinating person. We'd love to have you back on, because I'm sure there's loads of topics we didn't cover there that I'd really like to talk to you about. Yeah, thank you for just joining our conversation. We'd just love to, you know, work with you as much as possible, really. Yeah, in any way possible.
Thank you so much as well.
What is it called? Circle back with each other after your Vipassana. I'm really curious to see how it goes.
Yeah. Really like
I would love to hear
those.
I'm nervous. Tell the audience what that is. The Vipassana, because I wouldn't have known. Well, what is it, Casey? Is it like
it's a 10-day silent meditation retreat.
There we go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Life-changing. Everyone I've ever heard that has participated has had life-changing experiences while they're there. So being the mom of a 2-year-old right now, it's not really something I can do.
I can't even imagine that.
But as soon as I can, it's on my list, my bucket list of things to do. So it'll just be really inspiring to hear
I think it should be on everyone's bucket list. But yeah, it does sound kind of culty or brutal until you explain it. So I'd be more than happy to share my experiences about that.
Cool.
Well, thank you for having me,
best
guys.
wishes for that, and great to meet you.
Thank you so much, Chloe.
Thank you, Chloe.
Lovely to meet you.
So much.
Cheers.
And you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye now.
Bye.